The Carolina Hurricanes road trip continues as they make a stop in St. Paul, Minnesota to take on the Wild. And if I'm in St. Paul, I'd be very worried about a Category 5 storm coming their way.
You're Locked On Hurricanes, your daily podcast on the Carolina Hurricanes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to a Thursday edition of Locked On Hurricanes, your team every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thank you to the Everydayer for making this your first listen of the day. 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, talking everything about your Carolina Hurricanes. I'm your host, Zach Martin. I'm the credentialed Carolina Hurricanes beat writer over at the Hawkers, also an AHL writer at the Calder Times, the co-host of the Searchcast, along with all my duties here at Locked On Hurricanes. Got a game day Thursday edition of the pod as we get to preview the Hurricanes at the Minnesota Wild for their last meeting of the regular season. Why the Hurricanes are going to look to avoid the regular season series sweep and end it on an even 1-for-1, and the players to watch while also on the Hurricanes, but also with the Wild as well. But before we jump into all of that, today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONAHL for $20 off your first purchase. Now, Carolina's second to last game before they go into the Four Nations break. The last time they faced the Minnesota Wild, it did really not go up for the Carolina Hurricanes, and this was 2 days after going to Florida to beat them 3-1 to start 2025. They were home against Minnesota where they lost that game 4-0. And if anyone remembers that one, overall, you can just definitely tell from start to finish that the Hurricanes, this just was not their game. Minnesota was all over them. Marco Rossi just absolutely torched them, along with Matt Boldy and Mats Zuccarello. Now, for this game, it is a 7:30 p.m. Eastern start, which is kind of surprising for the fact that this is a 6:30 game back in Minnesota. You would think it'd be a little bit, probably about a 8 p.m. start time, somewhere like that. But nope, this is actually a little bit earlier than we all thought. The reason why? Well, it's because it's on ESPN Plus and Hulu. So if you have one of those, great, you're able to watch it. If not, there is 99.9 The Fan with Mike Intrip on the call at least. Now, looking at the last 10 games for each side, a little bit of a different tale of the tape for the Wild and the Hurricanes. Minnesota does come into this game 4-6-0 in their last 10. They have lost the last two games to the Ottawa Senators and the Boston Bruins, and the Boston Bruins just lost to the New York Rangers 3-2. But in the middle of that 10 games, Minnesota did have a 3-game winning streak against the Blackhawks, the Maple Leafs, and the Montreal Canadiens. But for the Carolina Hurricanes, they're on the right side of their last 10 games. How about 6-3-1, which included that 4-game winning streak against the Golden Knights, Blackhawks, Dallas, and Columbus, and then they won back-to-back against the Rangers and the Chicago Blackhawks to round out January. Unfortunately, the start of February has not been kind to the Canes, as they lost 4-2 to the LA Kings on February 1st, and then unfortunately, on Tuesday, they lose to the Winnipeg Jets 3-0, and it unfortunately is what it is. But, it's going to be on the right side of 500, especially over the last 10 games, if you're the Carolina Hurricanes. Now, looking at, who is leading the points, goals, and assists over the last 5 games for each side. For the Carolina Hurricanes, obviously, Andrei Svechnikov, 2 goals with 3 points. Dmitry Orlov with 2 assists. On the Minnesota Wild side of things, well, it's Frederick Gaudreau with 2 goals and 4 points, and then Matt Boldy with 3 assists for the Minnesota Wild. Now, going over their records quick, Carolina is 32-18-4, still top 5 in the entire AHL and top 2 in the East, while the Minnesota Wild are 31-19-4, and they're looking to be in a battle for the Central Division. But of course, they really got to catch the Winnipeg Jets, who are basically kind of running away with the entire show. Now for the goaltending situation, I'm very curious to see how this is going to get played because you do have Philip Gustafson, 20-11-3 with a 2.66 goals against average, a 9.13 save percentage, which with 3 shutouts for the Wild this year. Of course, last time the Hurricanes played them, it was Gustafson in net. Marc-Andre Fleury, 11-6-1 with a 2.57 and a 9.10 save percentage with a shutout. Of course, that shutout came against the Montreal Canadiens in his last game in Montreal. So do we get to see Marc-Andre Fleury for the last time against the Carolina Hurricanes in the regular season, or will they go with Philip Gustafson? For me personally, I would love to see them play Marc-Andre one last time, maybe unless it's in a Stanley Cup final. But in terms of the regular season, I would hope that, you at least get to see, Flower one more time at least. And then for the Carolina Hurricanes, so we did get Pyotr Kochetkov last game against the Jets. I really can't blame Pyotr for how that game went. It is what it is. They're on the wrong side of 2 power play goals. Like I said in the last show, you got to give credit to the Winnipeg Jets. They're the reason why they're the number 1 team in the entire NHL. If you take out the disallowed goals on both sides, technically maybe the Jets still kind of win that game. If it was 2-1, maybe 3-1 with an empty netter, who knows? Different possibility. But, as I, don't agree with some of the calls, you still got to give credit to the Jets. But really can't put that one in Pyotr. In terms of who the Hurricanes might go with, I can definitely see this being a Frederik Andersen start. So that way they're making him sit for a long period of time as well. So it's most likely get ready for Frederik Andersen in the net. He's 6-2-0 with a 2.12 goals against, a 9.13 save percentage with 1 shutout. Pyotr Kochetkov, 19-10-3 with a 2.48 goals against, a 9.03 save percentage, and a shutout. Now, this is the last time these two teams face each other. I could definitely see this being a case where it's on Marc-Andre Fleury against a Frederik Andersen type game. The Wild could go with Gustafson as well. But if this is the last opportunity for Marc-Andre to go against the Canes in general, would not be upset to see if that's the case. Obviously, you want to get a win against Flower, but it'd be kind of cool just for the storylines of being, hey, it's his last time playing against the Canes. Why not? Since we already saw Gustafson against them, but who really knows? And for the Hurricanes, this is where it's one of those things where, we'll talk about more in segment 2 of you just have to come out and be ready to go. Yeah, you want to forget about the Winnipeg game. Didn't go your way. And, Brendan Morris said it, Sebastian Aho said it, the whole leadership group is saying it, is, hey, last game is last game. Nothing you can do about it. I mean, that's why the Jets they have the best power play in the entire league. That's why they're number 1 in the entire NHL in terms of points. Hey, you get goalied, stuff happens. It is what it is, but you turn the page, you get ready. Now you go into Minnesota and see them for the last time in the regular season. You look to even the series up. You finish the last road game before you go into, your 4 Nations break with, the fact that you still got to play the Utah Hockey Club back at home on Saturday. So this is where you just want to go in, get back in the win column, snap this slight 2-game skid, and then you kind of just, I know momentum doesn't really get carried to the next game, but I think the confidence gets a little bit bigger once you're going into the last home game before you go on that 2-week break. So for Carolina, this is a case of just going to Minnesota, forget about what happened in Winnipeg. You just go into the barn. XL Energy Center is going to be loud. And, it's the state of hockey. That's what they call it that for a reason. And you just want to go in there and, beat the Minnesota Wild because they beat you last time in your barn. Well, now you come in and do a revenge win and take care of business in there. It's just you got to, the Hurricanes were close in shot totals and looking at, natural stat trick of shots for, shots against, chances, high dangers, and all that stuff. You got to make sure that you come in and, make your shots worth it. Make your shots important where it's not just going at his chest. You're finding angles, you're finding corners, you're, getting guys in front of the net and all that good stuff, which, we will talk about that here in segment 2. So stick around. I also go into why the Hurricanes need to try to avoid the regular season sweep against the Minnesota Wild. So Stick around, as I'll do that here in a second on a Thursday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. Looking for tickets to your next big event, whether it's a concert, a comedy show, or a sports game, finding the right ticket at the right place can be a headache. But with Gametime Picks, it's never been easier. Let me tell you how it works. With Gametime Picks, the app does all the work for you. It curates the best deals so you don't have to waste time searching through endless ticket listings. And the best part, you're covered with Gametime's lowest price guarantee. If you find a better deal somewhere else, they'll refund 110% of the difference. Plus, your tickets are guaranteed to be delivered on time with easy cancellation options if something comes up. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. Welcome back to segment 2 of Locked On Hurricanes, your team every day. Now, for the Carolina Hurricanes, what do they need to do to avoid getting regular season swept by the Minnesota Wild? And as cliche as it sounds, I know when we have Mike Maniscalco on to preview the Winnipeg Jets game, you got to look at special teams. And special teams is going to be a big factor. And it definitely was a factor against the Winnipeg Jets because you hear from Rod Brind'Amour, that's what they talked about. You have to neutralize the Jets' number one power play unit. Unfortunately, it didn't work out. You gave up 2 of the 4. They had 4 chances. You gave them 2 power play goals. Not a great night for the PK unit. Power play still struggling a little bit to get going. Even with Shane Gostisbehere back, they put Brent Burns on the first power play unit. Technically, the Hurricanes did score on the power play with the Jackson Blake goal, but, we all know what happened with that. Mikko Rantanen had an opportunity, goes off the post. Bounces, man. Welcome to hockey. It is what it is. So you had the opportunities to do it on your own power play. Just got stink bitten from, other circumstances. And, the puck goes an inch more to the left, different story. But it is what it is. So it's, you have to come into this game ready to go when it comes to the special teams. And when you look at the special teams, this is where it might be a slight advantage to the Hurricanes, but we all know how the tail of the tape usually goes when it comes to looking at the stats. Power play, Carolina's 21st in the NHL with 19.9%, while Minnesota is 24th at 18.8%. So slightly better if on the Hurricane side of things, but it's still not great for the fact you're looking at a power play unit who's really been struggling, over the last few games, over the last few weeks. You were top 5 at one point, you were top 10. Now you're looking on the bottom half. Now you're into the upper, you're in the 20s now. It's definitely a situation where you're looking at a power play unit that's clicking at less than 5%, over the last few weeks. That's not really a good sign for the Carolina Hurricanes when you're starting out hot. Yeah, Minnesota's not that great either when they're 24th, but what can you do? Now, this could go in their favor, though, when you look at the penalty kill, where Minnesota is 70.8%, which puts them 30th in the entire NHL. So there's only 2 teams worse than Minnesota on the penalty kill, and one of them is the New York Islanders, who are in the 60s. But this is where it works in the favor for the Hurricanes. They're still first on the penalty kill at 85.4%, and that's even after going 50% against the Winnipeg Jets on Tuesday. So for the Hurricanes, this is an opportunity to kind of get the mojo back going for the PK, take advantage of the fact that you're not going up against a number one power play unit. Now you're kind of looking at a team who's, farther down in the, mid-20s. So you have an opportunity to, if you go on the penalty kill, you have ways to kind of build yourself back up, get back, put your penalty kill a little bit higher, closer to 90, and take advantage of their struggling power play unit as much as yours is. But if you're looking at the Hurricanes, you have to think something has to click for these guys. One of these goals has to go, especially for Mikko Rantanen, who's been so close. Just, haven't gotten any of the luck. But if you have Rantanen, Aho, Jarvis, Svechnikov, if you want to use Burns, if you want to use Gostisbehere, you can make that first power play unit really work. And even the second power play unit, it's still not bad either when you look at the fact of, with Jackson Blake over there, maybe it's Burns or Goss to spare, some of the other guys, Cock and Yummy. So this is where you can find a way to make it work for yourself. Now, looking at the faceoff percentage and what possession needs to be, possession has to be the key of the game for the Hurricanes. And they're third at 52.7%, while Minnesota is 27th at 47.2%. So for me, it's all about puck possession. Can you have possession of the puck, create opportunities to put yourself into a good spot? Because you saw it against the Winnipeg Jets. The Hurricanes, while they did get outshot for the most part, when you look at their created chances for and against, they were on the right side of that, all things considered. While some shots maybe were in the favor of, maybe against the top line, the other lines did play pretty well. But face-offs as of late, even with the loss of Jack Drury, they've been winning a lot of face-offs. Seriously, of course, you have Jordan Stahl, you got Red Burnmore, who's been there and done that. So this is where the face-offs leads into possession, and possession leads to more ozone opportunities to take advantage. And you really want to see that, especially after how Minnesota kind of torched you in the transition game. So this is where the Hurricanes really need to benefit from if you're winning pucks on face-offs, either in your own zone or in the offensive zone against the Wild. You're able to control the puck. You're able to control the game. And this is where you want to go into that barn and control puck as much as possible, control the play. Don't let them and don't let XL Energy Center kind of, run the roost or kind of run the momentum. This is where the Hurricanes need to take advantage of that and run it with themselves and make sure that they stay in front of this thing the whole time. Now, thing for that this can be interesting is that you're looking at the goals for and goals against. While the Hurricanes are 7th in goals for per game at 3.26, they are top 10 when it comes to scoring goals. But Minnesota is slightly out of the top 10. They are 11th at 2.83 goals allowed. So you're still talking about a team who really scores at a high click, where you're at, almost 3.3 goals per game, and you're in the top 10. But you are facing a team who is in the top half, just slightly outside of the top 10 when it comes to goals being allowed. Now, on the flip side of things, the Hurricanes are 2.72 in their goals allowed per game. So that puts them 8th in the entire NHL. So rankings-wise, they are better than Minnesota, and they give up less goals per game. However, this is the thing for Minnesota. While they give up 2.83 a game, they also score 2.83 per game, and that puts them 20th. So when you look at how that works out, like I said, tail of the tape tells one thing. What's the eye test going to say in the actual gameplay? Because it's all what's going on the ice, not what a sheet or a screen tells you. But if you're the Hurricanes, this is where, like I said, you control possession, you control momentum. If you're able to control the possession game and limit the Minnesota Wild's chances, that's a team that's still in the 20s in the entire league. They're on the bottom half of the entire NHL when it comes to scoring goals. So if you're able to control the possession, you're able to control them on creating chances, because you want to try to limit the chances as much as possible. And that's even with Kirill Kaprizov not in the lineup. But you still got Zuccarello. You still got Janusz Brodin, who's back. You also have Boldy, Rossi. There's still a lot of guys on this team, that could do some damage. So you have to find a way to control the possession, to control the shot opportunities that they're going to have. So that's definitely something that's got to be big. And for me, and this is kind of the last one that is, how can the Hurricanes avoid a regular season sweep? Well, once again, another cliche things, but is you have to be playing 60 minutes of Canes hockey. Yeah, you maybe have 40, maybe 45 minutes against the Winnipeg Jets, but the shots were there, but it's just the shot quality wasn't as what you were looking for. Even when you're playing, even if it was against Connor Hellebuyck, you were playing against Comrie, there should have been a way where you could have seen better shot opportunities instead of just putting it right on his chest or on his pads. If you want to shoot it at his pads, make sure you have someone crash in the net. You got to go for the rebounds. You got to put pressure on the goalie and stuff like that. You can't just be shooting at will on him and he's seeing everything. You need that net front presence to put pressure on him, and that's kind of the thing that you need to do. And if you're going to do that, well, make sure you have some of this in front of the goal. So for me, this is where it's if you want to get going, you're going to have to make this a full effort of what we saw against the Rangers, what we saw against the Panthers, how you won 10 games in the month of January where he got 22 points. So this is where you want to go into that barn. And like I said, you want to control possession, but you also want to take that barn out of it too. Quiet the crowd, start early, score early, and keep your foot on the gas, and make your shot qualities, worth it. Make them high danger. Make them to where you're having to make the goalie. Whether it's Gustafson or Marc-Andre Fleury, you got to make them work hard in this one. So for me, it's just you got to look at special teams. You got to controlling possession and controlling the tempo, and also 60 minutes of Hurricanes hockey. Keep your foot on the gas. Get that barn quiet early. So if you're on YouTube, let me know in the comments, what are your keys to the game for the Carolina Hurricanes to get that revenge win in Minnesota and avoid the regular season sweep against them? So we talked about what are the keys to the game. We also previewed the game, but who are the players on each side that Hurricanes fans need to keep an eye on? So stick around as I'll do that here in a second on a Thursday edition of the Locked On Hurricanes. Welcome back to segment 3 of Locked On Hurricanes, your team every day. So like I said, we're now going to look at the players to watch when it comes to the Minnesota Wild and the Carolina Hurricanes. And obviously, we're going to look at the Minnesota Wild first. And for me, I would say Kirill Kaprizov, but he's out for the next few weeks, so that's just not going to be the case. But for John Hines' team, well, you got to look at Marco Rossi. 46 points in 48 games. He's a plus 14 right now. 96 shots on the season, and he does average 18 minutes and 14 seconds. Of course, we all know what he did against Carolina the last time he played them, so this is where you kind of want to limit his ability to not pop off for 3+ points in that game. So he really did a lot of damage to the Hurricanes. So you kind of want to find a way to limit him, because even with Kaprizov out, he is the top points getter for the entire Minnesota Wild. So you definitely want to keep him at bay. Another guy, well, you got to watch out for Matt Boldy. 45 points in 54 games. He's a +4, 187 shots, 19 minutes and 56 seconds of total time on ice per game. Boldy leads the entire Minnesota Wild in shots, and I cannot believe for the fact that he's got 187 shots already, 54 games into the season. He's easily going to eclipse 200, and you saw what he did against the Hurricanes last time too, so you really got to limit Boldy. If you limit him, you're in a good spot, because right now, for the fact that he is just absolutely shooting at will, but he does carry a lot of PIMs with 35. So if you get under his skin, get him off his game, you might be able to find a way to limit him, which will also limit Marco Rossi. So even if they're on the same line together, if you find a way to limit those guys, however the Minnesota Wild want to play them together, or however that works out, you got to be able to eliminate both of those guys. And we kind of talked about him as well. Another guy you got to watch out for is Frederick Gaudreau. Yes, he's got 23 points in 54 games, but he's been on a streak run as of late, like I said, with the Minnesota Wild. 4 points, 2 of them were goals. So you definitely want to keep an eye out for him. So it's one of those things where, yeah, you could maybe look at a Matt Zuccarello who's got 36 points, but and maybe even an Eriksson Ek with 23. But Gaudreau has been on a little bit of a run recently. When it comes to guys who are on fire, this is something to where you want to keep one of those guys in check. Now, the Minnesota Wild are also down a guy as well in Ryan Hartman. He did get suspended for 10 games for basically face planting Tim Stützle's face into the ice. He did appeal it, but they're weighing on how that's going to work out. So in terms of that, don't expect to see Ryan Hartman. So that's one less, I guess, agitator, someone who's not afraid to throw the body. So that's one less guy you got to worry about if you're the Carolina Hurricanes. So that's something you should be all right with. But you do have Marcus Foligno. That's a guy you don't really want to overlook as well when it comes to being able to be a physical body or presence. Of course, like I said, you got to watch out for Jared Spurgeon and Jake Middleton and all of them. And like I said, I'm really curious to see if it's going to be Gustafson or Marc-Andre Fleury in the net for the Minnesota Wild. Now, for your Carolina Hurricanes, I mean, obviously, not real surprise. For me, it's Mikko Rantanen because of the fact that, he was so snake bitten in the game against the Winnipeg Jets. You could definitely tell. Like, they said he had one shot. You could tell he had more. He even hit the post. but he is so close to having one of those breakout games where he's going to be 2, maybe 3 points, and maybe this is the one. Maybe this is the game because he's so used to playing Minnesota at this point because used to being in the Central Division with the Avalanche. He kind of knows the Wild pretty well, so maybe this works into his favor where it's like, okay, regardless of the fact that he's in the Hurricane system, he's still Mikko Rantanen. He's still one of the best power forwards in the NHL, a top 10 guy, in my opinion, a top 5 guy. If you put him in there against Minnesota, give him the proper minutes, maybe 19, 20 minutes, this is where he could really shine and have that breakout game where he is that guy that you want to go trade for, which he is. He comes as advertised. It's just the luck hasn't really been on his side as of right now. But I think this could be a breakout game for him with the Hurricanes where you see 2-3 points, maybe a couple goals, and he enforces his will on the Minnesota Wild because he's so used to playing against them. Now, that being said, you've got to look at his line mate, Sebastian Aho. 51 points in 53 games, 34 of them assists, 140 shots, which is second on the entire team, which is behind Andrei Svechnikov. Over 20 minutes of ice time, still is a -3, 5-game winning goals. But with Mikko Rantanen being on his line, Sebastian Aho really wants to break out with his buddy as well. So this could be a game where you're seeing the two Finns absolutely going off for maybe multi-point games combined. Maybe Mikko gets 2, maybe 3, maybe even Aho gets 2. Who knows? Maybe they can find a way to set up Blake and he gets at least a goal or something. Maybe he gets a multi-point game. So I would definitely not overlook this game of where that first line might be going off for maybe multi-points each, or at least 2 of them do it. And it could be Rantanen and Aho. Now, looking on the defense side of things, I'm really looking at Jacob Slavin, 20 points in 54 games, 94 blocks, 16 hits, 21 minutes of 41 seconds of ice time, which leads all defensemen. And this is a game where you want Jacob Slavin to enforce his will as one of the best, or I would say top 3 defensive defensemen in the NHL, because you got to find a way to stop Brock Faber, who's an offensive defenseman. You also got to find a way to stop Boldy. You got to stop Rossi, Zuccarello, Eriksson Ek, Foligno. This is a game where you're going to rely on Jacob Slavin a lot to make sure the penalty kill gets back on fire and they go perfect. Whether it's 2 for 2, 3 for 3, however you do it, even 5-on-5 play. You've got to find a way to stop the Minnesota Wild from scoring because they have a lot of guys who can put the puck on the net. We saw that last time they faced each other. This is a game and an opportunity where you see Jacob Slavin putting his will on there and shutting down those guys in that arena, because that this is the type of game where it's like, okay, it's gonna be the strength of the defense, is because the fact that Minnesota doesn't score a lot of goals, they don't really give up very much either, because like I said, they're almost top 10 in goals allowed. But you do have the Hurricanes team who's top 10 in goals for and goals against, and one of those reasons, well, it's Jacob Slavin's play. High IQ. Doesn't really give very many penalties. He's great with his stick. I mean, we saw in the game against Winnipeg, he had some insane hustle to cancel out an icing against the Jets. So this is where it's an opportunity for Jacob Slavin to make this game his own and find a way to stop all those big guys. And hopefully you can see the PK unit thriving off of him, and even 5-on-5 play too. And see where it goes and works on the transition, because with the Hurricanes, offense is built through the defense. Let's see if him and the defense get going against the Minnesota Wild. But like I said, just like for the keys of the game, let me know which guys you're going to be looking for the Carolina Hurricanes in this game against the Minnesota Wild. But guys, that will be a Thursday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. Thank you for making your first list for the day. Well, why don't you go check out Locked On Fantasy Hockey. Become a fantasy hockey expert and get the edge over your league mates with daily tips from Steal and Flip. Find Locked On Fantasy Hockey on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. If you want to keep up with me, I'm at OneTrueZach on X. The podcast is LO_Hurricanes. I'm also on Blue Sky at the Zachary Martin. I do have link trees in both my bios where you can check out all my articles at the Hockey Writers or HockeyWriters.com. Also my HL content at thecaldertimes.com. If you want to check out my other podcasts, well, it's the Search Cast on all podcast platforms and on YouTube. That's more of a weekly show. And we did just have Shane Willis and Mike Maniscalco on that pod if you go check out almost an hour worth of that content. And for Locked On Hurricanes, well, we're on Spotify, we're on Google, Apple, iHeartRadio, wherever you listen, we're going to be there. Locked On Hurricanes. Subscribe, follow, leave a 5-star rating and review, because if you do, I might just read it on the show. For YouTube, well, Locked On Hurricanes. Subscribe, hit the bell notifications so you don't miss the show. Hit the thumbs up button. Let me know if you like the show as well. Share with our other Canucks to become everydayers just like you. Hope everyone enjoyed this Thursday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. Enjoy your Thursday and have fun watching your Carolina Hurricanes take on the Minnesota Wild for the last time in the 2024-25 regular season. And until next time, as always, let's go Canes.